Good morning. We are happy to have Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki among us, the premises of the European Parliament. Welcome, Prime Minister. And we'll have now a press conference. The usual format. First, I will give the floor to the Prime Minister for an opening statement, and then Prime Minister will take some questions.
Sure. Thank you very much. I was taught to speak in Polish because of some Polish media, but then, of course, if there are questions in English, I can answer in English.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start off by saying that I have come to Brussels because, obviously, there is the European Council tomorrow, and we know that one of the main issues for discussion is going to be the financing and changes of the multi-financial framework, the MFF, financing for Ukraine facility. Obviously, we do support Ukraine and we do support financing for Ukraine, but we have to highlight that obviously this has to happen without damaging our common policies, in particular the common agricultural policy. From the viewpoint of the agenda of the European Council, I know full well that there are all sorts of other issues that are going to be discussed, not only those that are very closely linked to the conclusions of the European Council. So perhaps I can address some of the main issues where perhaps we have a slightly different view and opinion compared to our political opponents. Those who are currently governing in Poland will be represented at the European Council. The first issue where there's a main difference is the agreement on the Migration Pact, i.e. the disagreement on the distribution arrangement for illegal migrants and financing of this. We feel that this view and this approach is something that we are going to be trying to disseminate to our interlocutors in Europe. And we feel that the only effective way of trying to deal with migration in the long term is not to open the doors to Europe, but to have a better control on the borders and to have a more modest but honest policy towards those countries where there is a lot of migratory pressure and where we see, which are obviously countries of origin of a lot of the migrants. And we are considering, and probably will be considering, a veto on this kind of approach to illegal migration. So the approach that is being put forward currently by the government in Warsaw, in Poland. And there's another difference between ourselves and our opponents in Warsaw and perhaps some others in the European Council, and that is the reform of the treaties. I don't know whether tomorrow there will be discussion on this particular issue. It's possible, even though it is not a specific point on the in the conclusions. But I think it's worthwhile just dwelling on our position here, saying something about our viewpoint. Further centralization of the whole decision-making process in Europe is basically a road to nowhere, because it's going to lead to an increase in various radical groupings and atmospheres in all parts of Europe. And if we were to follow this path to enlarging the European Union, it means, of course, that there would be a reduction in the competences of the European Commission. So there wouldn't be any further commonality of policies, but basically would be going back to a situation sort of 20, 30 years ago, where the European Union perhaps was easier to govern because there weren't that many areas, there weren't that many issues where the European Union had competences. So obviously, when it comes to the work that's being done on the treaties, i.e. being carried out today, leading to doing away with the right of veto and having further powers and competences transferred to Brussels, i.e. to cover different sectors where we would have more qualified majority voting. We feel that all of this would lead to a dangerous phenomenon in the European Union. The third, well, the first was Ukraine, second, illegal migration. The third issue, changes to the treaties. The fourth area are the tax changes related to some of the things that are being done at the moment. Once again, the new government in Warsaw has agreed to so-called own resources on the basis of 3 new taxes. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, tax matters are within the bailiwick of the member states, the competences of the member states. And so obviously you can only have unanimous voting on anything to do with tax issues within the Council of the kind of decisions that are to be taken. And agreement being given by the Polish government to 3 new taxes which are going to be very costly for Poland. Obviously, we have Polish journalists here in the room, so we would have to highlight this particular point. The idea is to take the 25% ETS into the central budget. And at the moment, this forms part of the Polish budget. So transferring that to the Central European Union budget, that is going to obviously be detrimental to Poland and Polish interests. So these are the main issues that I wish to address. But I know, of course, that today in Europe there are very many farmers right across the European Union who are very concerned about the European Commission and their policies in the area of agriculture. I would like to take this opportunity to express our solidarity with the Polish, the French and the Belgian farmers, those who are going to be demonstrating tomorrow about the excess administration which is linked to the Green Deal. And this is highly unjust as well for countries like Poland, because there is a whole aspect of competition between farmers and countries. So I think we have to introduce some good sense here. And then, of course, there's the tension around the European Union, which depends on a lot of different policies. Obviously, from Poland, we do support Ukraine in their fight against Russia, because this is absolutely key to guarantee safety and security on our continent and to guarantee stability, which is so important for economic growth in a society in the future. So that's what I'd like to say by way of introduction. Thank you.
Please identify yourself and the medium you represent. Yes.
Thank you. My name's Eddie Wax, and I work for Politico here in Brussels. 2 questions, please. Firstly, Viktor Orban in Hungary has said that he would like to join the European Conservatives and Reformists group in the Parliament. Would you both be open to that, and what's the status of the negotiations going on? Secondly, there's been a report this week that a Latvian MEP, Tatiana Zdanoka, is alleged to have been a spy for the Kremlin for many, many years. What is your response to that, and do you think that there could be a problem of Russian interference in the EU and in the Parliament? Thanks.
Well, to your first question, it's of course prerogative of the Hungarian government, Viktor Orban in particular, and then our prerogative to accept a new member. I'm not sure if any changes might happen prior to the European Parliament elections. After the elections, me personally, I'm open to Fidesz joining our ECR group, that be part of the discussions, negotiations, of course. To your second question, I am fearful of the Russian interference, I know very well how intrusive they might be in their policies, in their cyber attacks, in their espionage and other in other type of interference in the political system. In Poland, in other countries, we've seen their fingerprints all over the place, basically. And right now, prior to elections, not only I'm fearful, I'm absolutely certain they will be very active through their agents, through their spies, and through other different means. I don't know, Professor.
Dorota Bawołek.
Dorota Bawołek. Obviously, I work together with very many Polish newspapers. We're meeting here in Brussels. What about the European Fund for Justice? Because 280 million zloty have been spent from this. So what about this money? What is your opinion of that? And what are you expecting of the work being done by the European Public Prosecutor, who's taking a look at the use of these funds? And for the benefit of the foreign correspondents, non-Polish correspondents, what should go into the Polish budget? And would law and justice, like early elections, because this is something I think that has been addressed here in Brussels. When it comes to the actions of the prosecutor, perhaps I could say something about what's happening in the country, because that's important as well. In our own legal system, there's a very clear provision, a provision that states that when it comes to a change in the public prosecutor, this has to be done in line with instructions from the President. So that is very clear. So if there is going to be a new national prosecutor general, that has to be done with the agreement of the President. Donald Tusk's government, in a very extreme way, is violating that right, so violating the Polish constitution. And we have to talk about this. We have to inform you of this so that you are aware of this, because the government has appointed, illegally appointed to the post of the prosecutor, somebody who is acting as the prosecutor. So this kind of post or function does not exist in the Polish constitution. So this is a step that has been taken. Obviously, you read what President Andrzej Duda has said. This could lead to huge chaos in the Polish legal system, because any actions by a prosecutor that has been appointed in this way, and any further prosecutors appointed by this incorrectly appointed national prosecutor, all of this could be detrimental when it comes to different affairs that are being dealt with before different courts. Having said that, obviously, I could go back to the first part of your question, because anything that's done by prosecutors that have been wrongly appointed, it means that they're usurping their right to be a prosecutor, and so that's would be an issue. But of course, we're talking about everything has to be done according to the law, of course, and so prosecutors in this particular case will have to take a look at irregularities. Under my government, we acted firmly against corruption, and the fight against corruption is the DNA of the party that I represent, of which I'm the vice president, and obviously we are focusing our efforts on this because we are in favour of fighting corruption. And then the second part of your questions, I think the President of Poland has this prerogative, of course, and one would have to consider this. Well, obviously, there's the budget that is going to before Parliament, before the Sejm. It was a budget, a draft budget that was prepared by my government with its there were budgetary deficits, but as I see the situation, this is a budget which I don't think really gives rise to any serious problems at this stage. Obviously, my successor in Warsaw, if they don't make any severe changes to this, then I think it should be. But we'll just have to see what happens over this first quarter. And as to whether there are going to be early elections, well, I don't think anybody needs to worry about this because if they are going to go ahead, they will. It doesn't depend on us. We've only just had elections a few months ago. And obviously this year we've got local elections. And then, of course, there are going to be the European Parliament elections a little later. And we're going to fight our campaign there. So we have no specific desire, but no specific concern about early elections.
Good morning. My name is Katalin Zöldhögyi from Hungarian News TV from Budapest, and I would like to raise two questions regarding Hungary, if I may. What do you think about the position that have appeared in the press ahead of tomorrow's EU summit? Can Brussels get the authority to plan the destruction of a member state's economy? And secondly, do you think it is a rule of law issue if a member state takes a different position, for example, by suggesting that EU aid to Ukraine should be reviewed annually? Thank you very much.
The approach to the so-called rule of law is now very clearly visible in Poland, and how dramatically differs it if there is a liberal leftist government or if there is a center-right government. The number of laws and articles in our constitution in breach over the last couple of weeks is very high. Yet nobody reacts here. And by the way, I'm not asking for such a reaction because it's a sovereign state's prerogative to decide about what is going on in every country, in every member state. But there is not even a reaction on a very clear on breaching laws. The resolution by the Minister of Justice is changing constitution, which is ridiculous, but that's what's happening right now. Many articles of the constitution are also brutally raped by this government. So there is a huge ambiguity and very different approach to the rule of law depending on who is in charge, who is in power. That's the reply to your second question. To your first question, I see that there is an attempt, one after another, to blackmail Hungary and to press Hungary even more. I can only tell the Hungarian government and Prime Minister Orban that we are very much supporting his efforts to fend off those brutal attempts of blackmail, and they are completely out of law. They are completely breaching all the standards of proceedings. We do not accept such an approach. I read some article, I think it was in the Financial Times a couple of days ago. I don't think this is the way how the European Union should operate. Definitely no.
Okay, that concludes the press conference. Thank you, Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.